12 films from 2025 lost studios, hundreds of millions of dollars combined, earned terrible reviews and proved that even the biggest budgets and most famous stars cannot guarantee a single ticket sold. From forgotten fantasy adaptations to superhero disappointments that had executives scrambling, these are the year's biggest disasters. Starting our list as the most obscure disaster of 2025, In the Lost Lands earned less than 10% of its production budget at the box office. That ratio alone makes it one of the most spectacular failures Hollywood has witnessed in years, and almost nobody even knew it existed. Dave Bautista and Mila Jovovich starred in this George R.R. Martin adaptation, with Paul W.S. Anderson directing on a $55 million budget. When theaters tallied the receipts, the worldwide gross landed somewhere between $4.7 and $6.1 million, which meant the studio lost approximately $50 million. Domestic numbers came in at a mere $1.8 million, and the opening weekend hovered around $1 million across 1,370 theaters. Critics handed it a 24% on Rotten Tomatoes, dismissing the whole production as generic fantasy fare that failed to capture what makes Martin's writing compelling. March 7, 2025 put it against stronger competition, and the studio dumped it into theaters with minimal marketing. What makes this one particularly frustrating is all that wasted potential on screen. George R.R. Martin's name carries enormous weight thanks to Game of Thrones, and Bautista had just come off his successful Guardians of the Galaxy run. Somehow, that combination produced a film audiences completely ignored. Anderson's directorial style worked perfectly for the Resident Evil franchise, but here's the thing. It simply did not translate to Martin's literary fantasy world. Streaming platforms like Hulu and Prime Video gave it a modest second life, but the theatrical release was a catastrophe most viewers never heard about. Alarum achieved something remarkably difficult in 2025, earning a 0% score on Rotten Tomatoes and joining that unfortunate club of films so universally panned that not a single critic found anything positive to say. Lionsgate and 101 Studios released this one on January 17, 2025, following two married spies whose quiet life gets disrupted when intelligence agencies hunt them for a stolen hard drive. Scott Eastwood starred alongside Sylvester Stallone, Mike Colter, and Willa Fitzgerald, with Michael Polish directing on a budget between $15 and $20 million. The worldwide gross barely reached $3 million, domestic numbers hit approximately $1.5 million, and the opening weekend failed to crack $1 million. A Metacritic score of 23 out of 100 reinforced how badly critics received this film. Leslie Felperin of The Guardian awarded it 1 out of 5 stars, calling it a film so bad it shames American cinema itself. The Rotten Tomatoes critics' consensus described Alarum as a lackluster spy thriller with uninspired performances, pedestrian action, and a convoluted but banal plot. Peter Subzinski of RogerEbert.com gave it 1 out of 4 stars, noting that Stallone's work here makes his appearance in The Expendables 4 seem focused by comparison. This failure highlighted a concerning pattern in Stallone's career trajectory that fans have noticed for years. His continued output of forgettable action vehicles has become worrying for anyone who remembers his glory days. Scott Eastwood, despite his famous lineage, still has not managed to establish himself as a viable leading man, and this film certainly did not help. A Metacritic score of just 6 out of 100 gave War of the Worlds the dubious distinction of being the lowest scored major release of 2025, and this Amazon MGM production disappointed on every conceivable level. The film took a screen-life approach to H.G. Wells' classic story, following a Homeland Security analyst watching an alien invasion unfold through computer screens and video calls. Ice Cube and Eva Longoria starred alongside Clark Gregg and Devin Bostick, with Rich Lee directing. Rotten Tomatoes started at 0% before climbing slightly to 4%, while audiences gave it 21%. David Fear of Rolling Stone delivered one of the most memorable reviews, writing that this War of the Worlds is not bad, or even so bad, it's good, but rather a secret third thing. He called it a hodgepodge of shoddy CGI and dead-eyed reaction shots from Ice Cube that make you feel like you can identify individual brain cells mid-cycle. Peter DeBruge of Variety called it a shameless Amazon advertisement, noting that Ice Cube plays the government's least convincing security expert. The screen-life format worked effectively for films like Searching back in 2018, But here's the thing. It proved disastrous when applied to epic science fiction. Watching an alien invasion through webcams and video calls stripped away any spectacle the source material demanded. With an estimated budget around $30 million and minimal theatrical returns, the estimated loss approached $25 to $30 million. For a classic story adapted successfully multiple times, this version stands as a particularly embarrassing entry. Nicolas Cage's latest paycheck misfire landed a Metacritic score of just 20 out of 100, with Rotten Tomatoes critics hovering around 15%, and Gunslingers represents everything wrong with his volume over quality approach. Set in a town called Redemption where wanted criminals hope to fake their own ends, the film starred Cage alongside Stephen Dorff and Heather Graham. Brian Skiba directed on a budget of $12 to $15 million. Worldwide gross reached approximately $2 million, with domestic receipts around $800,000, which meant the estimated loss mirrors the budget. Roger Moore of Movie Nation observed that as the mayhem and six shooters and bad acting go off all around him, Dorff stands above it all, reminding us that this might have been taken seriously instead of all this vamped bad makeup and screenwriting ineptitude. Variety dismissed the production as some sort of Western cosplay weekend, which captures the amateur feel that permeated every frame. The Cage renaissance that produced genuinely acclaimed work like Pig in 2021 and Dream Scenario in 2023 clearly has limits. His filmography now includes more misses than hits, and Gunslingers falls firmly in the miss category. Western movies continue to struggle at the box office as audiences demonstrated with Horizon, an American Saga's failure in 2024, and combining a struggling genre with Cage's scattershot approach produced predictable results. $132.7 million. That's the verified loss deadline reported for Tron, Ares, making it one of 2025's most spectacular financial disasters and one of the most documented flops of the year. Disney invested a staggering $347.5 million total into this project. Production alone reached $220 million according to Deadline's exclusive reporting, significantly higher than Disney's publicly stated figure of $170 to $180 million. Marketing and promotional costs added another $102.5 million, with residuals and other costs contributing $25 million more. Worldwide gross reached just $142 million. Domestic receipts hit $73.2 million, and the opening weekend delivered approximately $23 million domestically, roughly half of the projected $45 to $50 million. Joachim Running directed the film, starring Jared Leto, Evan Peters, Greta Lee, and Jeff Bridges, reprising his role from the franchise. Rotten Tomatoes landed at 55%, and the October 2025 release did nothing to help. 15 years had passed since Tron Legacy, which itself underperformed back in 2010, and that gap eliminated any franchise momentum. But here's the thing, the bigger problem was Jared Leto's involvement. He elevated himself to producer and restructured the narrative around his character, alienating fans who hoped to see Legacy's original leads return. The Guardian gave it 1 star, calling it mind-bendingly dull. An industry talent representative told Deadline there was no specific vision, to be honest, and that the idea Disney would spend $250 million on a Jared Leto film in a franchise that has not worked in 4 decades is insane. Another insider told The Hollywood Reporter that in a world where Michael Fassbender, Ewan McGregor, and Benedict Cumberbatch are having a hard time getting lead roles, why would you even go to a person who cannot open a movie? Production troubles plagued the film throughout. Sean Bailey, the chief studio proponent for the project, departed Disney during production, leaving it without its main champion. Jeff Bridges later compared the finished product to Heaven's Gate, hoping for eventual critical re-evaluation, and that comparison accurately captures this disaster. Industry sources confirm Tron will likely retire from the big screen following this failure. Legendary talent in front of and behind the camera still produced one of 2025's notable disappointments with the Alto Knights. Robert De Niro starred in a dual role as both Frank Costello and Vito Genovese, with Barry Levinson directing and Nicholas Pileggi writing. On paper, this pedigree should have delivered something special. Levinson directed Rain Man and Good Morning Vietnam. Pileggi wrote Goodfellas. De Niro is De Niro, and yet the film arrived decades too late for its formula to connect with modern audiences. Warner Brothers invested between $45 and $50 million, and the worldwide gross reached just 9.5 to 10 million. Domestic numbers came in at approximately 5 million. The opening weekend failed to crack the top 5, and the estimated loss sits between 35 and 40 million, with a Rotten Tomatoes score around 30%. Warner Brothers head David Zaslav reportedly championed this as a pet project, featuring multiple cast members from The Sopranos in an attempt to recapture prestige crime drama magic. Variety noted that times have changed, and the Alto Knights looked like something from another era. The mob movie formula that defined the 1990s simply no longer connects with audiences the way it once did. De Niro's dual performance would have been a major selling point in an earlier decade, but the material felt exhaustively familiar. Two De Niros for the price of one still could not draw audiences to a story they had seen countless times. The genre that gave us some of cinema's greatest achievements has become a liability. Combining wedding comedy and action genres pleased virtually no one with Bride Hard, a film following a spy/bridesmaid who must save a wedding party from armed mercenaries while pitching itself as a comedic riff on the Bruce Willis film. Lionsgate produced it on an estimated budget around $30 million, with Rebel Wilson and Anna Camp starring and Simon West directing. Worldwide gross reached approximately $8 million. Domestic receipts totaled around $4 million, and the estimated loss landed between $25 and $30 million. Rotten Tomatoes hovered around 18%, with Metacritic awarding 23 out of 100. Mark Kennedy of the Associated Press delivered a harsh assessment, writing that Bride Hard, which combines thrusting male strippers dressed as Vikings as well as action sequences, is neither funny nor thrilling. He noted it has the kind of lazy pacing you would find on the Hallmark Channel and acting not much better than amateur productions. Simon West gave us Con Air and The Expendables too, but he has struggled to recapture his 1990s action glory. Rebel Wilson's post-Pitch Perfect career has produced diminishing returns, and this represented another step down. The concept itself was not inherently flawed, since a comedic action film centered on a wedding could work with the right execution. But here's the thing, execution matters enormously, and Bride Hard failed to deliver on its premise in any meaningful way. Kevin James paired with Reacher star Alan Ritchson for Playdate, an action comedy about two stay-at-home dads whose afternoon playdate goes horribly wrong when professional pursuers begin chasing them. Screen Gems and Sony distributed the film on an estimated budget between $25 and $30 million, with the worldwide gross reaching approximately $12 million. Domestic receipts totaled around $6 million, producing an estimated loss of $20 to $25 million. Luke Greenfield directed. Rotten Tomatoes sat around 12%. And Metacritic gave it 20 out of 100. Matt Donato of the AV Club wrote that when people complain about the passing of mainstream comedies, it is bottom-feeding films like Playdate that are the genre's executioner. He described it as having no energy, no wit, just a tasteless and tacky sequence of events that barely clears the bar for what is considered a movie. Kevin James maintains his remarkable record of never having starred in a live-action film with a positive Metascore. The action-comedy pairing formula that worked for combinations like Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart has not transferred to other duos. Ritchson's rising profile from the popular Reacher series should have helped, but his star power proved insufficient to overcome the material. An easy win for Universal and Blumhouse should have been Five Nights at Freddy's 2, considering the first film earned $297 million on a $20 million budget. Instead, the sequel squandered its inheritance with a plodding, bloodless execution. Production budget increased to $30 million, worldwide gross reached approximately $85 million, and domestic receipts totaled around $45 million, with an opening weekend of approximately $25 million. After accounting for marketing costs, the estimated loss sits between $10 and $15 million. Emma Tammy returned to direct, with Josh Hutcherson, Elizabeth Lail, and Piper Rubio starring. Rotten Tomatoes landed around 22%, with Metacritic at 26 out of 100. Jesse Hassinger of The Guardian wrote that, like a lot of movies, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 has its own souvenir popcorn bucket, and this may be the first one where the bucket is more entertaining than the feature. Owen Gleiberman of Variety called it a slasher film without scares or tension. The sequel promised to reveal the origins of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, material that should have been compelling for the franchise's devoted fan base. What nobody expected was how badly the PG-13 rating would hurt them. That rating helped the first film reach younger audiences, but it became a creative straitjacket for the sequel. Horror fans wanted genuine scares that the rating prevented, while the built-in audience expected significantly better. $320 million makes The Electric State one of the most expensive films ever produced, and Netflix entrusted this sum to directors Anthony and Joe Russo, fresh off their success with Avengers Endgame. The cast included Millie Bobby Brown, Chris Pratt, Ke Huy Quan, Anthony Mackie, Woody Harrelson, Stanley Tucci, and Giancarlo Esposito. Set in an alternate 1990s America, the film follows an orphaned teenager searching for her brother with help from robots and a smuggler. Despite that star-studded lineup and proven directorial team, critics savaged the result with a Rotten Tomatoes score of just 14%, though audiences proved more generous at 76%. Metacritic gave it 30 out of 100. Kevin Maher of The Times wrote that the look is mid-period Transformers, the dramatic tension non-existent, and the performances uniformly weak, calling it top-dollar tedium. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian noted there is no soul, no originality, just a great big multicolor wedge of digital content. Christy Puchko of Mashable wrote that it is so dunderheaded, she remains angry about its existence. That 14% Rotten Tomatoes score represents a stunning fall for the Russo brothers, whose Marvel Cinematic Universe entries averaged well above 80%. The gap between critics and audience scores suggests the film found casual viewers, but failed to impress anyone evaluating it seriously. At $320 million, this stands as one of the most expensive streaming disasters ever produced. Anthony Mackie's debut carrying the shield arrived trailing clouds of production chaos with Captain America: Brave New World. Marvel and Disney invested approximately $180 million in production, though some estimates suggest the total reached $350 million after extensive reshoots, with marketing adding another $100 million plus. Worldwide gross reached between $370 and $415 million. Domestic receipts landed between $165 and $207 million, and the four-day President's Day opening weekend delivered $100 million. Julius Ona directed, with Harrison Ford, Danny Ramirez, and Tim Blake Nelson co-starring. Rotten Tomatoes landed around 45%, and the February 14, 2025 release told you everything about the studio's confidence. The estimated loss varies between 30 and 60 million, depending on reshoot cost estimates. At least 3 rounds of reshoots occurred after test screenings called the film inessential and flat. 5 different writers received credit, which is never a good sign. Principal photography wrapped in June 2023, then the film endured over a year of uncertainty. Matthew Orton from Moon Knight came aboard in December 2023 to write new material, and Giancarlo Esposito got added as a villain during reshoots for a political thriller tone. Originally scheduled for July 2024, the release was pushed to February 2025, traditionally a dump month. Test screenings used different colored bracelets to show different audiences different cuts, suggesting the studio remained uncertain about which version would work. This represents the MCU's 3rd consecutive underperformer, confirming that even well-marketed superhero films cannot guarantee attendance in the post-Endgame era. Estimated losses between $200 and $295 million earned Snow White the undisputed title of 2025's biggest box office disaster. Walt Disney Pictures invested between $250 and $270 million in production, with some reports suggesting the total reached $350 million after multiple reshoots. Worldwide gross reached just $205 million. Domestic receipts came in around $87 million despite an opening weekend of $88.8 million. And that drop showed audiences quickly abandon the film. Mark Webb directed Rachel Zegler, Gal Gadot, Andrew Burnap, and Martin Kleba, with Rotten Tomatoes landing at 44% from critics, though audiences proved more generous at 71%. Metacritic gave it 47 out of 100. March 2025 brought the release after a full-year delay from March 2024 due to SAG-AFTRA strikes and reshoots. The initial budget started at $180 million but ballooned through production troubles. After Peter Dinklage criticized plans to cast actors with dwarfism in January 2022, Disney scrapped those plans and replaced them with expensive CGI creations. COVID delays, a Pinewood Studios set fire, and strike interruptions all contributed. Disney effectively abandoned the promotional campaign, holding an unprecedented downsized premiere with only an afternoon screening and no red carpet press. Star Rachel Zegler's comments calling the original animated film weird generated years of negative publicity before the remake released. Tyler Tying of Discussing Film wrote that aside from Rachel Zegler's powerhouse performance, there is little else to enjoy from this clumsy and cynical live-action Disney remake. Joseph Robinson of Fish Jelly Films noted this underwhelming interpretation feels more like an unfunny, overly long, pre-recorded sketch than something magical. A rival studio executive told industry publications that you cannot say a live-action remake of the most iconic film in the vault that cost that much and has been reshot multiple times opening to $50 million is acceptable, arguing that movies should be a billion-dollar movie. Disney is reportedly reconsidering its live-action remake strategy, with the Tangled remake paused. A combined total approaching $1 billion vanished from studio balance sheets thanks to these 12 films in 2025. From forgotten fantasy adaptations like In the Lost Lands to mega-budget disasters like Snow White and Tron, Aries, the pattern remains consistent. Massive budgets cannot compensate for poor creative decisions, production chaos, or misunderstandings of what audiences want. Star power has evaporated. Nostalgia has limits. Superhero fatigue is real. Controversy costs real money when negative press builds before a film opens, as Snow White demonstrated. The clearest lesson from 2025 is that intellectual property alone cannot guarantee success, and the stories behind these failures often prove more compelling than the films themselves.